Part 97. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 961. The flying scorpion's huge body and its eye-catching giant claws give ordinary people an overwhelming sense of pressure. Standing in front of the flying scorpion, especially in front of the largest flying scorpion king that Xiaopinggan rides, ordinary people feel, it's like an armored vehicle is pushing towards you, and you can't help but be forced to retreat. When the peasant soldiers who opened the city gate saw the flying scorpion king at close range, their faces turned pale and their steps faltered. They quickly retreated to both sides, completely clearing the way to the city gate. Those who came to watch the excitement did not dare to get close. "My lord, this flying scorpion." Xuanhuan stood on the road like an iron pillar, looking at those huge and oppressive flying scorpions in surprise. Ordinary warriors face these flying scorpions. "I'm afraid there is no way to fight back. These flying scorpions have been conquered by me. From now on, they will become a part of Lingxiao City and can be used as mounts for the Templar warriors," Xiaopinggan said. "Templar's mount?" Xuanhuan looked at the flying scorpions, and then at his white horse not far away, and suddenly felt that his white horse no longer smelled good. Xuanhuan's feeling at this moment was like a rider who was accustomed to riding a motorcycle and suddenly saw that someone could still drive a tank. The impact, mobility, attack power, and domineering power of this flying scorpion were unmatched by any horse. Riding on a horse like this when the mount is on the battlefield, it is invincible. As the saying goes, a sword goes with a hero. Naturally, this powerful mount also goes well with a hero. Thinking of the scene of him riding a flying scorpion and rampaging on the battlefield, Xuanhuan stared straight at the flying scorpions pouring into the city behind Xiaopinggan, and his saliva almost flowed out. "My lord, Xuanhuan's throat slipped and he wanted to say something. Xiaopinggan just glanced at Xuanhuan and knew what Xuanhuan was thinking. He smiled slightly and said, "You can also choose a flying scorpion as a mount." "Thank you, Lord." Xuanhuan was overjoyed all of a sudden, with a smile on his face. "Bring these flying scorpions to the storm cavalry camp and inform the craftsmen in the craftsman camp to make saddles suitable for people to ride on them, and then let the Templars adapt to them. In 3 days, these flying scorpions will go out with us," Xiaopinggan ordered to Xuanhuan. As he spoke, he had already risen from the back of the flying scorpion king. With just his feet on the flying scorpion's back, the whole person was already heading towards the temple. The electricity shot away, and only the sound came back from the air. "Yes," Xuanhuan looked at Xiaopinggan's back and responded loudly with excitement. Xiaopinggan really doesn't have to worry about these little things, he can just leave them to Xuanhuan. Thinking about it carefully, there are still very few talents available in Lingxiao City. There are only 3 people who can take charge of their own affairs. Xiaopinggan feels that when his available divine power becomes more abundant, he should summon a few more available people, not to mention the ability of counselors and officials. If you are a general, you can also summon a few more, especially those who are good at defending the city. A general like Xuanhuan is a meritorious general. Letting him defend the city is like hiding a treasure bow in a bag, and does not bring out his ability. Once you kill the troops from the kingdom of Gru this time, you will have divine power. In a moment, Xiaopinggan arrived at the temple with lightning. Kui Hao, who received the news, just came out of the temple and happened to meet Xiaopinggan. "My lord, have you conquered those flying scorpions?" Kui Hao's face was filled with excitement and surprise. He originally thought that Xiaopinggan was just going to find out the information about those flying scorpions, but he didn't expect that in just a few hours, to their great surprise, the flying scorpion nest that was originally a hidden danger to Lingxiao City actually became the arsenal of Lingxiao City, and the Lord actually subdued those flying scorpions. Yes, the flying scorpion lair is now owned by Lingxiao City. There is another barrier in the southwest of Lingxiao City. I have asked Xuanhuan to bring those flying scorpions to the storm cavalry camp. If you want a mount, you can also pick one, which can both travel and protect itself. The flying scorpion's combat power and ability to escape from trouble cannot be underestimated. Thank you, Lord. Although Xuanhuan was not as excited as Xuanhuan, he was still very happy to have a flying scorpion as a mount. However, looking at Xiaoping's appearance at the moment, he hurried back to the temple, not knowing what he wanted to do. By the way, Lord, there are still 3 days left for the expedition. Please prepare yourself. I don't have anything to do here for the time being. I will return to the land of the Divine Seal to explore. I will go out for the expedition in 3 days and come back, Xiaoping said as he rushed to the temple. And then the soul suddenly turned into a ray of light and submerged into the sky caisson of the temple. Xuanhuan looked at Xiaoping's disappearing back and could only smile bitterly and shake his head. As a summoner, the only way for the soul to enter and leave the world of the kingdom of God is through the temple of the secret mandala. There are still 3 days left, so you can make good use of it. You have just explored a small part of the island. The remaining time is just enough to explore the island and see if there is anything else to gain on the island. In the cave of the Divine Seal world, Xiaoping opened his eyes and saw that Black Dragon and Xuanhuan were still loyally guarding the cave. He touched Black Dragon's head and said, "Thank you for your hard work. I always let you and Xuanhuan protect you." The Black Dragon shook its tail, "Woof, woof. I'll find you a female companion anytime, let you start a family and give birth to a bunch of little black dragons, that will be fun." The Black Dragon understood Xiaoping's words and waggled its tail even more happily, "Woof, woof woof woof. No, the island outside is too dangerous and the situation is unknown. I can't take you out." Xiaoping touched the Black Dragon's head again, and without saying anything, he left the cave in a flash and came outside again. At this moment, the wind and snow on the island are slightly lighter, but the sky has become darker. The sun behind the thick clouds has almost set on the sea in the west. It seems that it is almost evening. Fortunately, the light has no effect on Xiaoping. Even in the dark, he could see things as if they were daylight. Xiaoping turned into a crane again, flew into the air, used illusions to hide his figure, and then flew directly in the direction where he had found the frigate bird before. After flying near the frigate bird's nest, Xiaoping remembered something and wanted to slap himself on the head. "I'll go, those frigate birds live on this island, and their range of activities is larger than those of the killer bees. What's on this island? Those frigate birds must know something special. These frigate birds also need to hunt in winter. Why did I forget about this? It seems that I am still not used to using these new summons." After muttering something in his mouth, Xiaoping thought aloud. When he was in the air, a cloud of mist appeared behind him, summoning the strongest frigate bird. "Is there any special place or something special on this island? Take me to see it." Xiaoping passed an idea to the frigate bird. The frigate bird called out in the air and headed directly towards the central mountain range of the island. Fly away. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 962. Flying over the mountains in the middle of the island, Xiaoping discovered that there was actually a lake in the middle of the mountains that was not frozen. Viewed from the air, the unfrozen lake is very obvious. The surrounding area of the lake is already covered with snow, but the lake is dark green, and there is heat steaming out from the surface of the water. Perhaps for frigate birds, this is the most peculiar place on the island, so they brought Xiaoping. This is a dormant volcano on the island. When he saw the terrain around the lake clearly, Xiaoping immediately understood that because this was a dormant volcano, there were abundant geothermal resources, and the lake did not freeze. This dormant volcano is not big. Even if it erupts again, it will only affect the surrounding area of hundreds of square kilometers at most. It will not threaten the safety of the island. The god of tricks is so cunning that he will not choose a passage to enter the land of the divine seal. Dangerous crater. Judging from the conditions of the mountains around the lake, this dormant volcano has erupted many times over the past millions of years, thus forming the surrounding terrain and mountains. To Xiaopinggan, this lake formed by a dormant volcano was ordinary and nothing interesting to see. Just when he was about to leave and let the frigate bird take him to see other places on the island again, he suddenly smelled an unusual smell in the sky, which came from the lake below. The smell that comes from the steam is slightly smelly, a bit like rotten eggs. Xiaopingyan, who was about to leave, smelled the smell and refused to leave. Wait, this is the smell of sulfur. Xiaopingyan immediately realized that places where dormant volcanoes and active volcanoes gather usually contain a large amount of sulfur minerals. Now that you're here, let's take a look before leaving. In the blink of an eye, Xiaopingyan fell from the air to the steaming lakeside, and regained his human body again. The frigate bird also landed on a rock not far away, preening its feathers. The snow on the mountains around the lake is very thick. The closer you get to the lake, the less snow there is. In places where the snow is very shallow, the exposed ground shows a very bright yellow-brown color. Xiaopingyan walked to the lake, bent down, picked up some light yellow soil from the ground, looked at it, put it in front of his nose and smelled it, and immediately became energetic. Yes, this is sulfur, and it is very high-quality elemental sulfur. Xiaopingyan waved his hand, and a strong wind suddenly blew up, blowing away all the snowflakes within 10 meters of the ground in front of him, revealing the color of the ground. When I went there, the entire ground was filled with bright, dark yellow stuff, all of which was sulfur. Xiaopingyan suddenly became energetic. Kui Hao had just told him about Lingxiao City's resource problems before in Lingxiao City. He didn't expect that there was sulfur on the island. What Lingxiao City lacks most now is copper, iron ore, and coal mines. There is not much demand for sulfur as a sex mineral, but this sulfur is a good thing. There is a high probability that this sulfur mine can be used in the future. Xiaopingyan remembered that he had traveled all over China for archaeology in his previous life. Although China was vast and rich in resources and had many extinct volcanoes, there were not many sulfur mines that could be mined. China needed to import a large amount of sulfur mines from overseas every year. This is what God has given you. If you don't accept it, it will be wasted. Xiaopingyan grinned and used the eye of heaven to look at the ground. He didn't know it, but he was shocked when he saw it. Under the eye of heaven, the sulfur mine under his feet stretched out from the dormant volcano at his feet. More than 10 kilometers nearby, the 7 or 8 hills within are all made of high-quality single sulfur ores. These sulfur ores have also formed several veins of 5 large and 3 small ones. In the veins, the resource boundary symbols of 8 sulfur mines have been condensed. The resource boundary talisman emits yellow light and is hidden underground. The sulfur vein of the dormant volcano under his feet is just a small vein compared to the surrounding ones. The surrounding mountains are the big mines, and they were probably formed by previous volcanoes. The resource boundary talisman of this mineral resource is somewhat similar to the nest boundary talisman of the biological nest. It is also formed by the energy field aura of the land of the divine seal and these large amounts of aggregated minerals. There are some scattered sulfur mines around here, because there are not many of them. There is no condition to form a resource boundary symbol. Good boy, Xiaopingyan made a rough estimate. The mountains within a dozen or 20 kilometers around him must all be sulfur mines. A rough estimate of the reserves of this sulfur mine is at least tens of billions of tons. Could it be that the god of conspiracy chose this place as his foothold because he was interested in the sulfur mineral resources here? No matter what the god of trickery thinks, Xiaopingyan will not miss it if there are so many sulfur mines in front of him. If the sulfur veins of the dormant volcano at his feet are collected, the dormant volcano may erupt, but the surrounding those sulfur veins no longer have so many worries. Xiaopingyan's feet flashed, lighting up the snow on the ground as he flew through the mountains. In the blink of an eye, he jumped from the still steaming lake to another sulfur-filled mountain. He stretched out his hand and looked at the resources hidden in the veins under his feet. The boundary talisman activated the divine power and began to devour and fuse. It is not easy to integrate and swallow up such a mine, because the scale is too large, not as simple as a few trees, but a mountain. The resource boundary talisman in the sulfur mine at your feet is only small, but the small size is only compared to the large ones around it. In fact, this small sulfur mine package that has condensed the resource boundary talisman covers an area of more than a kilometer. There are also hundreds of millions of tons of sulfur ore. Xiaopinggan's divine power quickly penetrated into the underground mineral veins. Under the stimulation of Xiaopinggan's divine power, the resource boundary talisman in the mineral veins emitted a light green brilliance, and then the sulfur ores in the mineral veins also began to emit a light green brilliance. A full 2 hours later, the entire mountain began to glow with a light green light, and then, the next second, with a bang, the sulfur mine mountain disappeared, leaving a large pit of more than 1,000 meters on the ground. This sulfur mine was swallowed up and fused by Xiaopinggan's kingdom of God, and appeared in the mountains more than 20 kilometers away from Lingxiao City. Because of the appearance of this mine, the area in the mountains of Lingxiao City increased out of thin air. This is also equivalent to the land of the eastern wasteland of Beimashianguan continent in the kingdom of God quietly growing. This is the strange thing about the world of God's kingdom. The entire world of God's kingdom is growing and changing at any time. By this time, it was completely dark. Xiaopinggan was tireless and continued to fly to another mountain and began to devour and merge the next sulfur mine. This sulfur mine was larger, with a sulfur content of at least 10 to 2 billion tons. But a few hours later, with a loud bang, the sulfur mine disappeared, and was once again swallowed up and fused by Xiaopinggan's kingdom of God. Xiaopinggan worked like this for a whole night and a morning, until it got light again the next day, and another morning passed, and at noon, he integrated and devoured the 7 sulfur mine veins on the island, 5 large, 2 small, and 7. There was still a small sulfur vein left, which was the dormant volcano, and he didn't touch it. This sulfur mine is also a gathering place of the energy and aura of heaven and earth. There is no need to do anything too extreme. Cut off the sulfur mine here and leave the sulfur veins of the dormant volcano. There is such a crater. In the future, maybe the small veins left behind can grow and transform into large veins. Looking at the dormant volcano not far away, Xiaopinggan secretly thought, I have harvested tens of billions of tons of minerals from my hard work in a night and a half. High-quality single sulfur ore, if you sell these sulfur ores for money, I don't know how much you can sell. If you calculate it as 1,000 yuan per ton, wouldn't you have earned 10 trillion yuan in one day? Haha, demigod, it's indeed very profitable. Thinking of this, Xiaopinggan also found it interesting when he recalled the days when he worked as an auto mechanic to earn money. Regardless of whether these sulfur mines could be sold for money, Lingxiao City would never be short of sulfur mines in the future. He laughed and said the Frigate bird continued to take him around the island to see if there were any other gains. More than 10 minutes later, Frigate bird took Xiaopinggan and found a venomous snake's nest on the island. There were thousands of venomous snakes in the nest, large and small, and boundary talismans had been formed in the venomous snake's nest. Xiaopinggan didn't have any bad feelings towards snakes. These poisonous snakes would be good if thrown into the mountains to serve as sentinels. Xiaopinggan was not polite and collected the nest of poisonous snakes and placed them in the mountains outside Lingxiao City that were already shrouded in mist. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 963. The god of trickery is really a thief. The island he chose has only some very low-level creatures. These creatures will never threaten him. At the same time, There are also huge reserves of sulfur mineral resources. These sulfur mines, whether you use it yourself or do business with others in the future, you can use it. On the night of the third day, heavy goose feather snow began to fly over the island again. The frigate bird that had followed Xiaopingan around the island for 3 days had already invited Xiaopingan back to the world of God. At this moment, on the highest mountain of the island, Xiaopingan, standing on the top of the mountain with a figure as tall as a sword, looked down at the island in the heavy snow, and finally fully understood the intention of the god of conspiracy in choosing this island. Except for the poisonous snake's nest, Xiaopingan never brought other animal nests on the island to Lingxiao City. There are actually 2 animals on this island that have formed boundary symbols in their nests. One animal is a kind of crab near the coastline of the island. Those crabs are quite big, each one is the size of a wash basin, and there are quite a lot of them. There are more than 100,000 of them, all hidden in caves on the seaside. Xiaopingan did not take away these crabs because these crabs have their own requirements for the living environment. These crabs can only live on the seaside. If they leave the sea, they will be released. Around Lingxiao City, within a few days, all these crabs would starve to death. Therefore, instead of killing them, it is better to let these crabs continue to live on this island. In addition to crabs, there is also a very special, colorful, and beautiful hummingbird on this island. Xiaopingan doesn't know the name of that hummingbird. Let's call it the musical hummingbird. The wings of that hummingbird vibrate when it flies. They make a sweet sound similar to playing strings. These hummingbirds also have a nest. Xiaopingan did not take these hummingbirds away. The reason is the same as the crabs in front. This hummingbird only eats the nectar of a strange plant on the island. That kind of plant cannot survive without the environment of the island, so this hummingbird can only admire it. As for the available mineral resources, except for the high-quality sulfur mines on the island, they are really lackluster. After 3 days of working on the island, Xiaopingan finally had a thorough understanding of the island's situation. On this last day, Xiaopingan was actually looking for the reason why there were wild wolves on the island. He had seen the bones of wild wolves that were hunted by man-eating bees before. He thought there were wolves on the island, but after 2 days of searching, he discovered that the environment on the island was actually not suitable for wolves to survive. The number of wild wolves on the island is also pitifully small. Under natural conditions, it is impossible for a wild wolf group to be born on this island. Things like wild wolves belong to mountains and grasslands, not to the island in front of them. So, where did those wild wolves on the island come from? If you don't think about this problem carefully, it will be ignored. But once you think about it carefully, it will be like a mess, like an unsolved case and a mystery waiting to be solved, which will make people dizzy. After a day of searching, observing and thinking, just like solving a case, Xiaopingan finally knew how the wild wolves on the island came to be. Like him, they fell from the sky. Yes, that's right, the only reason why these wild wolves appeared on this island is because the space around this island is chaotic and unstable. The few wild wolves on the island, just like him and those meteors, were transported through a certain and unexpectedly opened space channel leads to the island. Poor wild wolf. At this point, the mystery is solved, and there are no more secrets for Xiaopingan on this island. The only place that Xiaopingan has not yet explored is the surrounding sea area. However, the surrounding sea area is too big and time is limited. Xiaopingan has not gone deep into the sea to explore. Even if he can find some nests in the sea, there probably won't be any. How to take him away can only be done after Lingxiao City has dealt with the crisis at hand. 3 days are almost over. Let's go back to the cave today to have a good rest, sleep, have a good meal, and refresh ourselves. Let's go back to Lingxiao City tomorrow to lead the troops on an expedition, Xiaopingan said to himself as he looked at the snowy sky. After saying a word, and then smiling slightly, the whole person suddenly jumped up from the mountain peak, and his body disappeared into the wind and snow. More than 10 minutes later, there was a flash of light and shadow in the cave, and Xiaopingan had passed through the array outside the cave and entered the cave. After Xiaopingan ate something, he fell asleep on the bed in the cave. In the blink of an eye, the immortal sleep skill was activated. With Xiaopingan's even and fine breathing, his entire body and energy were in sleep. In the middle, I wonder if he has climbed to the top again, and gradually the golden light and shadow of the dragon and tiger are still looming on his body. After sleeping for 6 hours, Xiaopingan stretched and woke up amidst the crackling of bones all over his body. With a wave of his hand, Xiaopingan directly summoned Xuanhuan and the assassin. This time I return to the kingdom of God to lead the army on an expedition. It may take a long time. I don't know when I can come back. I will leave my body to you, Xiaopingan said to Xuanhuan and the assassins. This body cannot enter the world of the kingdom of God and can only stay in the cave. There must be no mistakes, so it can only be guarded by the two most reliable summons. Xiaopingan was relieved that there was a formation disk protecting the cave. After the explanation, Xiaopingan went to bed again, lying down like a god, and he suddenly returned to the temple of the secret mandala. Han Xian, Kui Hao, and Xuerongui had been waiting in the temple for a while. When they saw Xiaopingan appeared, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Your Majesty, the troops have been assembled outside the temple and are ready to go at any time, Han Xian said calmly. At this moment, Han Xian, like Xuerongui, was already wearing armor and ready to go to war. Lingxiao City will be left to you, Xiaopingan glanced at Kui Hao. Kui Hao bowed to Xiaopingan and said, please rest assured, my lord. Then let's set off. Xiaopingan didn't say anything more, but simply walked towards the outside of the temple. When he walked out of the temple door, he saw that the troops from Lingxiao City had already assembled outside. The 700 flying scorpions lined up are particularly eye-catching, just like 700 tanks. With the efforts of Lingxiao City craftsmen, the 700 flying scorpions have been equipped with leather saddles like war horses, which can make people relax. Of riding. 340 Templar warriors rode energetically on 340 flying scorpions. Xiaopingan only left 10 Templar warriors in the city. 200 archers and 200 Wei soldiers also rode on the flying scorpions. All 100 storm cavalry were also riding on their war horses, eager to try in the team. The golden flying scorpion king was at the front of the team, with a larger saddle on his back. This was Xiaopingan's mount. Next to the flying scorpion king, there are 2 flying scorpions with empty backs. Of these 2 flying scorpions, one is Xuerongui's mount and the other is Han Xian's mount. The team did not raise a flag. According to Han Xian's request, everyone was dressed in rags and their faces were painted in colorful colors. Even their armor and leather armor were deliberately made black with mud and soot, making them look like savages. All disguised as an unidentified roguelike team. No one was watching, and no one was bidding farewell. The surrounding area was quiet. There was no one idle in Lingxiao City at this moment. Looking at the team, Xiaopingan didn't say anything to encourage morale. He directly leaped onto the flying scorpion king and sat down. Han Xian and Xuerongui also rode on the flying scorpion neatly. Xuerongui turned around and jumped onto the flying scorpion mount several meters high, with a graceful movement. Han Xian was also unambiguous. He came to face Scorpion, stepped on the saddle on the ground, jumped up, grabbed the saddle on face Scorpion's back, and turned over like a windmill. Flying Scorpion is very straightforward. As a soldier, although Han Xian's martial arts is not outstanding, it is by no means ambiguous. Seeing the two of them boarding the flying scorpion, Xiaopingan was no longer vague and just waved and said 2 words, "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, the flying scorpion king he was riding rushed toward the north gate, and the other flying scorpions and storm cavalry quickly followed. The team exited the north gate. Above their heads, several warship birds were already circling in the sky to clear the way. As the eyes of the army, Xiaopinggan waved his hand, and the illusion of beacon fire to play with the princes was activated, and the entire army flashed in the wilderness. After a while, it became blurry, like a chameleon, blending into the environment, making it difficult for people to see. Golden Summoner. Author, Zyu. Chapter 964. Xiaopinggan waved his hand gently, and an ice pick shot out from his hand. With a sharp sound of breaking through the air, it flew 100 meters away and penetrated the bodies of 5 wolf cavalry rushing towards him. And their mounts dissipated into light. This is a battlefield. Riding on the flying scorpion king, Xiaopinggan is strolling in the courtyard, calmly watching the massacre in front of him. The 4,000 farmers of the Gro kingdom, plus 1,000 wolf cavalry, and the long convoy were surrounded on this grassy plain. The cavalry from Lingxiao city led by Xiaopinggan suddenly rushed out from all sides like the wind, forming a huge circle on the grassland, surrounding the team from the Gro divine kingdom in the middle. In Han Xian's words, this battle does not require any tactics, just speed. The team responsible for the logistics of the Gro kingdom did not expect that they would be attacked when they crossed this grassland. For a moment, everyone in the team was in a hurry. The horn sounded by the wolf cavalry who discovered the target was approaching. After only 3 blasts, the wolf cavalry was shot into the head by an arrow from Xuanhuan hundreds of meters away. He screamed, fell off the horse, and instantly transformed. Light. What followed was a one-sided massacre. Not to mention the farmers, even the wolf cavalry were as fragile as scarecrows in front of the Templar warriors and Wei warriors riding on the flying scorpions. The cavalry team encircling them from all sides is like a circle of circular blades, which can easily strangle those who want to resist within the encircled area. If he encounters real farmers and civilians on the battlefield, Xiaopinggan will not let the troops attack these poor people. However, this is in the world of the kingdom of God. These farmers and farmers of the Gro kingdom, in the eyes of Xiaopinggan, in fact, it is similar to a tool man or robot summoned to take charge of simple tasks. It is not a flesh and blood person. His goal is only to destroy these tools and increase his own strength. In Xiaopinggan's eyes, everything the enemy has on the battlefield is walking divine power. The killing was precise and efficient. Xuanhuan, who was riding on the flying scorpion, found that when he shot the 5th arrow, it was already difficult to find the target around him. On such a plane, the flying scorpion was so powerful that it was like a tank running at extreme speed. Just now, Xuanhuan saw a galloping flying scorpion crash into a team of more than 10 wolf cavalry. The flying scorpion did not slow down at all, but it directly hit the team of wolf cavalry. On the spot, 5 or 6 wolf cavalrymen and their horses were hit by flying scorpions, causing their bones and tendons to be broken. They vomited blood and flew up, then turned into light and disappeared. The wolf cavalry who resisted picked up an arrow and shot at the flying scorpion beside him. The arrow just made a ding sound on the hard shell of the flying scorpion. The arrow and the flying scorpion's shell rubbed and hit a thin stream there was a thin flash of fire, and then the arrow fell to the ground. The wolf cavalry's force cannot even break through the defense of a flying scorpion shell, let alone inflict damage. In addition to the impact, the 2 giant pincers in front of the flying scorpion were waving. With the blessing of huge weight and speed, the giant pincers of the flying scorpion were invincible. A simple thrust, a heavy smash, or a cut would be enough. It can pierce and smash the wolf cavalry, including men and horses, or cut them into pieces. There were more than a dozen wolf cavalrymen, and a flying scorpion rushed over. In the blink of an eye, none of the wolf cavalrymen were alive, while the flying scorpion and the warriors on the flying scorpion were unscathed. The Templars stood on the backs of the flying scorpions, majestic. Their spears kept flying out of their hands, killing targets in the distance one by one and disappearing into glory, while the nearby targets were the flying scorpions themselves. It can be solved. The short spears of the Templars were inserted into the ground after passing through the wolf cavalry and the farmers who were transporting them. When the flying scorpions rushed past, the short spears automatically flew back to the backs of the Templars. The Wei soldiers had already jumped off the back of Fey Scorpion and were running on the grassland with knives like wolves, chasing the running figures, because these Wei soldiers discovered that if they continued to stay in Fey Scorpion, if they carry it on their backs, I'm afraid it won't be their turn to take action and the battle in front of them will be over. The Storm Cavalry was divided into two teams, riding on war horses, sweeping across the battlefield like two sharp scythes. The Storm Cavalry galloped quickly while bending their bows and shooting arrows, or drawing out their sabers and swiping at the necks of those running figures. Pass. In such a battle, for them, after the 1,000 wolf cavalry were quickly wiped out, there was no opponent on the battlefield. From the beginning of the battle to now, Xiaopingan only made one move, and he saw streaks of brilliance lighting up in his field of vision, and fewer enemies could run in front of him. As the last officer of the Gelag kingdom who was escorting the baggage troops with weapons was beheaded by Xuanhuan and disappeared, all that was left on the battlefield were figures running in panic, and the outcome was decided. Within the encirclement circle, no target can escape. Judging from the results, this ambush created another miracle of 0 casualties for our own side. The Templar warriors are indeed extraordinary. Their cooperation with the flying scorpions already has the flavor of the fusion of human and scorpion. At some point, the soldier immortal Han Xian rode a flying scorpion and calmly appeared next to Xiaopingan, and Xiaopingan watched the finishing work on the battlefield together. From beginning to end, Han Xian never made a move, his sword never left its sheath, and he kept watching everything that happened on the battlefield with a pair of profound eyes. After listening to Han Xian's words, Xiaopingan's eyes moved away from a Templar warrior in the distance. The Templar warrior was running and jumping on the back of the flying scorpion. He was extremely flexible and closely coordinated with the flying scorpion's movements. The flying scorpion would be a saint. The Templar creates opportunities to throw short spears to kill distant targets, and can choose the combat path to retrieve the thrown short spears for the Templar, while the Templar will use the spear to block the flying scorpions fired in melee combat. Some attacks on the head and abdomen kill opponents close to the sides of the flying scorpion's body. The broad back of the flying scorpion was the stage for the Templar warriors to cross the battlefield. The cooperation between the Templar warriors and the flying scorpion was like a gorgeous dance on the battlefield, which even made Han Xian marvel. After listening to Han Xian's words, Xiaopingan smiled slightly. The Templars have been eating and sleeping together with the flying scorpions these days. They have regarded these flying scorpions as their closest partners. I never thought before that they could sleep with the flying scorpions. Scorpio has established such a harmonious relationship so quickly. I also saw those Templar warriors reading the Analects of Confucius devoutly for these flying scorpions. I don't know if these flying scorpions can understand it. Han Xian smiled slightly. All things have animism, by the way. Xiaopingan turned his head and looked at Han Xian. The number of the Gru Kingdom's baggage troops is 1,000 more wolf cavalry than the information we received before. According to you, the Gru Kingdoms, will there be any changes in the future? Han Xian shook his head. No, this is just because the Gru Divine Kingdom was worried that the protective force of this supply force was insufficient, so they temporarily dispatched an additional cavalry team of 1,000 people to escort them. Our spies are currently staring at the Gru Divine Kingdom. There are no abnormalities in the deployment of troops in these cities, and there are no further preparations for war, so don't worry. Have you chosen the next battlefield? Have you chosen? Han Xian looked at the mountains to the south. 7 days later, the team that has not received the follow-up supplies of baggage and food will fall into panic. If their generals are still smart, they will know that something has happened to the baggage troops. Here in this case, their troops will be in a dilemma. Before the existing food and grass are used up, they can either choose a path to the dark side and continue to raid Lingxiao City, or they can return to the starting point immediately, depending on their general's decision. No matter whether they advance or retreat, I have chosen the battlefield for them. What we encounter on the battlefield will also be a panic-stricken army of the Kingdom of Gru. Xiaopinggan nodded. He was worthy of being a soldier. With Han Xian by his side, Xiaopinggan felt as if he had completely mastered the entire battle situation and everything was in order. This ambush took less than 15 minutes in total from the beginning to the end of the raid. No one from the Gru kingdom could be seen on the battlefield. In the end, only the long carriages transporting baggage were left. They were left on the grass like snake bones, and the baggage seemed to be delivered to Xiaopinggan and the others. Each department's supplies and baggage, if they cannot be taken away, will be destroyed on the spot. Xuanhuan's passionate and crisp voice has already resounded on the battlefield. Golden Summoner. Author, Zyu. Chapter 965. 10 days later, in the endless mountains to the north of Lingxiao City. A long team, like a giant snake, emerged from the road in the canyon in the distance and walked towards the north. The team carried the flag of the Gru Kingdom, blue background. Palaces and flames dotted with white stars. The power represented by this flag is not outstanding among the many divine kingdoms in the eastern wasteland of the White Horse Xuanhuan continent, but in this wilderness where there are not many people in sight, the flag is particularly eye-catching. I just don't know if it's because there is no wind in the canyon, but the flags in the team are hanging lazily on the flagpole. This team seems to have a large number of people and is majestic, but at this time, it gives people a sparse feeling, with an air of decadence. But even so, when the team arrived, some animals, insects and birds in the valley were so frightened that they flew up in fear. Walking at the front of the team were 5 giants with a height of more than 15 meters. The bodies of those giants were like 5-story buildings. The faces of the 5 giants were as simple and solemn as rocks, and their muscles were tangled. Naked to the waist, only wearing a huge tent-like sarong from the waist down to the knees. On the giants' shoulders were heavy weapons like maces transformed from battering rams, which looked very intimidating. There were originally no roads in the valley among the barren mountains. Weeds were everywhere, and thorns and rocks could be seen everywhere. But after the 5 giant feet passed by, there was an additional road on the ground. Let the troops behind follow the giant's footsteps and move forward. Following the giant, there are 20 tree men about 10 meters tall. The tree man is shorter than the giant. His whole body is like a big tree. These 20 tree men are not standing upright. Instead of walking, they lie flat on the ground. Under these tree men are a group of black centipedes. Each tree man is left with dozens of marching centipedes. These marching centipedes are like transport tracks. The tool is supporting the tree man's body and sending the tree man forward continuously. Because the tree people move slowly and cannot keep up with the marching speed of the army, when the army goes on an expedition, if there are tree people, these tree people will be transported by those giant centipedes like the master. Behind these tree men is a mixture of light infantry, wolf cavalry, engineers, and werewolves. Due to low morale, this cavalry, infantry, human, and werewolf team could no longer maintain their formation during the march, and the team was somewhat scattered. Confusion. The werewolves are each about 2 meters tall and look particularly majestic. However, when these werewolves approach the wolf cavalry, they will frighten the wolf cavalry's horses, so the wolf cavalry on the horses will yell loudly, and the werewolves will also turn red. His eyes revealed his ferocious teeth and he roared twice at the wolf cavalry. There was a clear stream flowing through the canyon. The light infantry and engineers passing by, in order to drink some water, started pushing and quarreling by the stream, until the officers in the team shouted loudly, rushed over on horseback, and took the water. The whip was whipped across the head and face, and the order of the march was restored. In charge of the rear of the team are 30 tree men lying on marching centipedes. Above the team, in the sky, there are white clouds. Several gray eagles are hovering above and in front of the team. Those gray eagles are the eyes of the mage accompanying the team, looking down at the situation on the ground in front of them from a high altitude. Of course, these are not the only birds in the sky. There are also some birds that were frightened along the way and are hovering in the surrounding sky. They are not noticeable in the sky. A gray eagle was flying in the sky more than 5,000 meters in front of the team, its sharp eyes scanning the ground below. This was a dangerous place, with steep and towering peaks on both sides of the narrow canyon. The gap between the canyons is more than 1,000 meters high. The peaks are jagged with rocks, and some peaks like sword blades stand silently. The gray eagle circled twice in the sky of the canyon. Its sharp eagle eyes found nothing unusual before it flew over this dangerous canyon and continued forward. Lingxiao City's team was actually ambushing the mountains on both sides of the canyon. The entire team had been obscured by Xiaoping'an's illusion of playing with the princes with beacon fire. The silent team became the grass, trees, stones, and air on the mountain, and the surrounding mountains. Completely integrated into one, the gray eagle did not have the ability to see through the spell, so it was naturally unable to detect it, and the team behind it kept moving forward. That gray eagle is interesting. Xiaoping'an, who was riding on the flying scorpion king, cast his eyes on the gray eagle in the sky and whispered to himself. This gray eagle is a mage accompanying the army of the kingdom of Gru. The summoned things, a few birds, naturally would not move Xiaoping'an. What really moved Xiaoping'an was the mages in the team. The mage was summoned by Gru, and the summoned mage had the ability to cast spells, which made Xiaoping'an envious. It seems that there are many interesting world beads that I haven't fused yet. I just don't know what kind of world beads the world beads that can summon mages are. Does it come from Lu Banshu, Zuyu Shu, or those sects of Taoism, or, he is a spell master from the Tang dynasty? Xiaoping'an was muttering to himself in a low voice, while countless Chinese classics and historical stories and allusions related to sect magic flashed through his mind. To ordinary people, magic seems to only exist in legends, but those who truly understand history know very clearly that the way of magic is real and has a long history. In the history of China, magic has great influence on it, has had a profound impact on the history of the country. The most famous one is the witchcraft case of Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty. In the Tang dynasty, magicians who were proficient in secret spells became a profession recognized by the court, called doctors of curses. In the Ming dynasty, among Buddhists, there is a secret story in the book. An ordinary farmer who practiced secret mantras was successful in practicing secret mantras. He wanted to see what the emperor in the Forbidden City looked like. Then the farmer really appeared in the form of the emperor in the Forbidden City. In front of him, the emperor was shocked. After the emperor asked the reason, he was also shocked. From then on, according to the royal decree, the secret mantra in the Buddhist scriptures published in the world was deleted. The Chinese Taoist techniques are also extensive and profound. The inheritance of techniques from various sects such as Tianqi, Mishan, Yinshan, Shenxiao, etc. are also magnificent and have the ability to penetrate the heaven and the earth. My lord, the enemy army is languishing. We will win this battle. Xuanhuan was beside Xiaoping'an. Xuanhuan, who was riding on a flying scorpion, looked at the approaching troops of the Gru kingdom in the distance, his eyes shining brightly. Said in a low voice, and licked his lips, unable to help but gear up. Xiaoping'an smiled slightly and looked at Han Xian next to him. How can you conclude that the god of Gru will choose this road to retreat instead of retreating from the original road? Han Xian was also looking at the approaching army of the Gru divine kingdom. When he heard Xiaoping'an's question, he just smiled slightly. The enemy commander knew that something happened to the logistics team and immediately ordered a retreat. He was unwilling to risk attacking Lingxiao City, which shows that he is a cautious person. The march traces left by their team along the way are too obvious. Although he does not know who is the team that attacked the Gro Kingdom's logistics, the enemy is obviously very strong. For the sake of caution, to prevent further unknowns, a strong enemy ambush, it is inevitable to reselect a withdrawal route, and after comprehensively considering the movements of the Gro Kingdom army, the distribution of resources along the way, the path and march schedule and secrecy, etc., although this wilderness is thousands of miles away, there are millions of mountains. But there are not many ways left for him to return to the kingdom of Gru, and the one under us is the most likely one. Han Xian's military tactics are almost demonic, and that's all. Xiaopingan nodded, "Thank you for your hard work, General. After this battle, Lingxiao City will be more stable, and we won't have to work so hard in the future. I wonder how many new divine powers Lingxiao City gained during the last ambush." Speaking of the last harvest, Xiaopingan smiled slightly and said a number, more than 120,000 points. There are not many troops available in Lingxiao City now. Every soldier is precious. If there are any remaining giants and mages later, I have to trouble my lord to personally take action. Han Xian saluted Xiaopingan and begged. Xiaopingan nodded calmly. In fact, even if Han Xian didn't say anything, he would not sit idly by. Those giants and mages were a great threat. In the hands of the mage, the team from Lingxiao City was waiting quietly here. Not long after, the team from the Gro Kingdom came as expected. The giants walking in front stepped into this dangerous canyon without any hesitation, and the troops behind them followed suit one after another without any warning. Just when the team of more than 15,000 people entered the canyon, Xiaopingan finally waved his hand and issued the attack order. The flying scorpions gathered under the straight and steep peaks on both sides of the canyon raised their giant pincers, like hundreds of bulldozers exerting force at the same time, and began to push and pull the straight and steep peaks. Just a few seconds later, with a loud rumbling sound as the earth shook and the mountains shook, several towering peaks on both sides of the canyon suddenly collapsed. Countless boulders of tens of thousands of tons fell from the sky and followed the steep mountain walls of the canyon. It was overwhelming and rolling down the canyon. This movement was simply earth-shattering. The moment the mountain peak collapsed towards the bottom of the canyon, more rocks flew and fell towards the canyon. The troops of the Gro Kingdom below the canyon were all stunned. They only felt the ground beneath their feet shaking slightly. The next second, the sky darkened slightly. When they raised their heads, countless huge rocks fell from the towering mountain tops on both sides. It rolled down with a rumble, and the rocks pierced through the air. Those boulders rolling down from above are as big as a house and as small as a watermelon or a fist. Who can resist such a stone rolling down from a height of more than 1,000 meters? The team of more than 10,000 people stood in a daze for a few seconds. In the blink of an eye, they started to cry and panic. The entire team did not care about the head or the tail. A group of people huddled together in the narrow valley, trying to find a way out, but there was nowhere to go. There is no way out. It is impossible to retreat or rush out of the canyon quickly. Because of the panic, some people wanted to go forward, and some wanted to go backward. The team of more than 10,000 people were all crowded in the narrow valley, with people shouting and horses neighing, and they huddled together. But at this time, panic and fear have no effect. Just more than 10 seconds later, the shadow of the rolling rocks in the sky quickly grew larger in everyone's eyes, and the huge rocks flying from the top of the mountain directly hit them. In the team. Rumble. A boulder the size of a house rolled down, turning hundreds of people in the canyon into blood and mud, and then dissipated into light and shadow. The 5 giants walking in the front looked like they were stuck in paper under the boulder. At the moment when the boulder rolled down, the 3 giants walking in the front were directly smashed into pieces by the boulder the size of their bodies, and disappeared with a huge roar. The huge boulder that killed 3 giants fell to the ground and turned into several large pieces. It jumped and rolled rapidly on the ground, just like rolling stones, crushing the 7 or 8 tree men behind who had not had time to get up. The smaller stones flew around like cannonballs and bullets, piercing the bodies of the surrounding soldiers. The rocks rolling down were like the power of heaven and earth, which was simply irresistible. The rocks continued to collapse, and the canyon was full of people and horses that had turned into light and disappeared. People and horses who were hit and buried were everywhere. The soldiers and cavalry were wailing and shouting, trying to escape, but it was all in vain. There was no way to hide under the canyon. Smoke and dust were everywhere in the canyon, and rocks were raining down. The tops of those soldiers from the kingdom of Gru on the mountain, there are still stones being rolled down. In just less than 2 minutes, when there were no more boulders rolling down from above, less than 1/3 of the troops of the Gru kingdom were left in the canyon, and many of them still brought injured. The entire team was in shock and was blocked in the canyon. Then, the remaining troops of the Gru kingdom saw giant scorpions appearing on the top of the canyon one after another. The giant scorpions were walking on flat ground on the vertical and steep mountain, and rushed down from the top of the mountain. Kill! Xuanhuan roared, riding his flying scorpion, brave and invincible, and rushed down from the mountain first. The flying scorpion, on the vertical mountain wall, walked as fast as flying, as if walking on the flat ground, roaring out in an instant. Xuanhuan had already shot an arrow at the target below, condescendingly. Although the distance is 1,000 meters, the arrows falling from the sky will gradually increase in speed and become more powerful, making them more difficult to resist for those below. When Xuanhuan fired the arrow, the Templar warriors also looked down and threw their short spears. The fight in the sky also started instantly. Some warship birds that were flying in the sky suddenly surrounded them from all sides, surrounding the grey eagles in the middle. The general who led the troops of the Gru Divine Kingdom was shot directly into the head by Xuanhuan. After screaming, he turned into light and disappeared. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 966. Almost at the same time that Xuanhuan's arrow hit the target, Xiaoping'an had already swooped down from the air. He was in the air, waving his hands, and with a long cry that resounded through the canyon, a huge flaming red bird spread out its flames. The shooting wings appeared at his feet. Xiaoping'an was like a god descending to earth, stepping on the back of the flaming Suzaku, descending from the sky with majesty. When the flame Suzaku was about to fly to the canyon, Xiaoping'an jumped up from the flame Suzaku, and then the flame Suzaku split into two, suddenly turning into two smaller Suzakus, flying with high temperature and flames all over the sky. Skimming across a messy canyon ground, he ignited the 7 or 8 trees and hundreds of soldiers along the way, and then rushed towards the 2 mages in the Gru Kingdom troops. When the rocks fell like hail just now, the 2 mages relied on their strong skills to avoid many rocks hitting their bodies. They also summoned water shields to protect their bodies, even if there were the rocks hit them and the damage was absorbed by the water shield, so until now, the 2 mages are fine. But the good luck of the 2 mages ended here. As soon as the stone in the sky ended, and before the 2 mages accompanying the army could counter-attack and release other spells, Xiaoping'an's flame Suzaku flew in front of them. One of the mage screamed, and his whole water shield was surrounded by the flame Suzaku. The mage's spell lasted for less than a second under the flame Suzaku. It shattered like a bubble, and the Suzaku brought the high-temperature flames instantly reduced the mage to ashes and dissipated into light. The experience of the other mage was not much better. When that mage saw the flaming Suzaku flying, his face changed drastically, and his whole figure accelerated suddenly, turning into a ball of smoke and trying to escape. At the same time, beside him, there was also a ghost image that was exactly like him, trying to divert the flame Suzaku's killing target, but the flame Suzaku seemed to have spirituality and bid him directly, before the smoke he turned into could escape 10 meters. Was caught up by the flame Suzaku, and after the same scream, the smoke turned into ashes, and the whole person turned into light and dissipated under the high temperature of the Suzaku. The mages summoned by other summoners may be considered powerful characters in the world of the Kingdom of God, but compared with the top summoning spells like Xiaopingan, they are not at the same level at all. In the blink of an eye, Xiaopingan used a spell to instantly kill them. It turns out that the mages summoned by Gru were nothing more than that. They were so fragile and couldn't be beaten at all. Xiaopingan, who was in the air, saw that he had killed 2 mages in the blink of an eye, and couldn't help but sigh. In his sigh, he was completely calm, like a feather, gently falling on the shoulder of a surviving giant. Xiaopingan, standing on the giant's shoulder, was just about as tall as that giant's head. The difference in size is huge. Of the 5 giants just now, only 2 were left, and those 3 were immediately destroyed by the boulders. The giant's reaction was a bit slow. The giant was still in the state of shock and anger. Suddenly he felt a heavy weight on his shoulder. When he turned his head, he saw a human standing on his shoulder, looking at him coldly. The giant roared, stretched out his big hand, and slapped himself on the shoulder like a mosquito. Xiaopingan shook his head, flew into the air, kicked out, and hit the giant's head directly. The giant's head, with a bang, scattered like watermelons under Xiaopingan's iron fist, and turned into light in the blink of an eye. If I could use the secret technique of combining magic and martial arts, I could crush you to death with just one finger from 10,000 meters away. Although I can't combine magic and martial arts here, it doesn't mean you are powerful in front of me if you are big. Just treat it as a warm-up for me. Xiaopingan, who kicked the giant's head off, shook his head. While killing the giant, his whole body was already rushing towards the last remaining giant. Past. Roar. The remaining giant roared, raised the mace like a giant pillar, and whipped it towards Xiaopingan. Seeing the mace coming, Xiaopingan did not dodge. When the mace came like a mountain, he just stretched out a hand and punched out. The fist hit the mace, and the giant pillar-like mace shattered into countless fragments. Like a cannonball and a sharp blade, it was shot back with more ferocity, piercing the body of the last giant with countless bloody holes. The giant screamed, fell to the ground, turned into light and disappeared. After killing the mages and giants in this team, Xiaopingan did not need to take action in the rest of the battle. However, Xiaopingan blocked the front of the canyon. The shock soldiers of the Gru kingdom in the canyon still gathered their strength. He gained courage, shouted, and rushed towards Xiaopingan in a swarm, trying to find a way out. There was a loud noise of boom. The flying scorpion king finally landed in front of Xiaopingan, blocking the soldiers of the kingdom of Gru who wanted to escape. With a wave of his giant pincers, the 7 or 8 cavalrymen rushing in front were even killed. He was knocked backwards and flew away, turning into light and dissipating. The flying scorpion king's tail with the poisonous needle then suddenly stretched out in front of the body. A red light flashed on the tail, and flames with scorpion poison spurted out from the scorpion tail, sweeping across the ground within 50 meters in front of him. Those soldiers turned into light and disappeared in the flames. Behind him, short spears descended from the sky with a roaring sound, sweeping the ground of the canyon in front of Xiaopingan like a comb. In just a few seconds, the ground within 100 meters in front of Xiaopingan was covered with short spears. All the hundreds of soldiers from the Gru kingdom who rushed towards Xiaopingan were killed. The flying scorpions finally rushed into the valley with the Templar warriors and Wei soldiers. The Wei soldiers who landed were like tigers coming out of their cages. They quickly rushed towards the soldiers of the Gru kingdom one by one. The flying scorpions, naturally not to be outdone, they rushed towards the enemy one after another. The Templars retracted the first batch of short spears thrown, and began to sweep through the narrow valley on flying scorpions. Facing the werewolves, wolf cavalry, and infantry, in this canyon, the flying scorpions brought overwhelming advantages and impact. Lingxiao City's troops blocked both ends of the valley. No one in the Gru Kingdom team could escape. Cries of death and screams rang out everywhere. At this time, Xiaopinggan stepped on the body of the flying scorpion king lying on the ground and sat firmly on his throne, calmly watching the final battle in the canyon. Among the remaining soldiers of the Gru Kingdom, the tree people are the most difficult to deal with. There were not many tree people left. Originally, Xiaopinggan could easily solve them, but Xiaopinggan didn't take action. He wanted to see the strength of his troops. When the arrows of the archers hit the tree people, the tree skin will not be broken. The bark on the tree people is like a layer of petrified armor. The fierce and skilled Wei soldiers' swords struck the tree man as if they were struck on a rock, but still had no effect at all. The impact and attack advantages brought by the flying scorpion's huge size will also be resolved by the tree man's size and strength. Seeing that a few tree men in the team had not fallen, the remaining soldiers of Gru Kingdom seemed to have seen hope, and their fighting spirit burst out again. However, this hope only lasted for a short moment. The Templars took action, and golden light began to appear on some of the Templars. Those Templars began to chant sentences from the Analects of Confucius devoutly. As the years get colder, I know that the pines and cypresses will wither. In the midst of such chanting, when the short spears of the Templars were thrown towards the few remaining tree men, the short spears glowed in the air, and golden flames and words appeared on the short spears. The short spears were thrown at the tree people like rockets. The tree people hit by the short spears burned quickly, turned into charcoal in the blink of an eye, and fell to the ground. 3 or 2 Templars can easily deal with the difficult treants. In front of the Templars, those treants were like slow-moving targets. They turned into torches in the blink of an eye and were destroyed by the Templars. Seeing this scene, Xiaopinggan's eyes lit up and he said softly, "Interesting." The performance of the Templar Knights exceeded Xiaopinggan's expectations. Once the tree people were finished, the only remaining troops in the kingdom of Gru were some stragglers who were running around. In less than half an hour, there was no longer a living soldier from the Gru kingdom in the canyon. Lingxiao City won a complete victory and completely wiped out the conquest troops sent by the kingdom of Gru. Golden Summoner. Author, Zy Hu. Chapter 967. From the sky, the huge lake area 1,000 kilometers to the east of Lingxiao City is very conspicuous. The area of the lake area is about more than 3,000 square kilometers. The lake is surrounded by lush forests under the sun. The outline of the entire lake looks like the leaves scattered on the ground are filled with emerald green lake water. A thin circle of mist surrounds the lake. The mist locks the lake and the surrounding forest together, making the calm lake surface look more peaceful. This place has water, mountains, trees, and countless giant trees. It would be good to set up a water and sky 3-wood array here. Xiaopinggan, who transformed into a crane, looked at the terrain here and couldn't help but think in the air. At this moment, several days have passed since the army of Lingxiao City won a complete victory and annihilated the troops of the kingdom of Gru. The troops led by Han Xian and Xuanhuan are about to return to Lingxiao City. They are only a few hundred kilometers away from the city defense formation outside Lingxiao City, and Xiaopinggan goes first. In one step, he transformed into a crane and flew here, preparing to take back the tree people gathered here. The base of these tree people is too close to Lingxiao City. For the safety and future development of Lingxiao City, if the tree people here cannot be conquered, they can only be eliminated. These tree men should have been dealt with when Xiaopinggan conquered the flying scorpions, but there was not enough time at that time, so it was postponed until now. The current Lingxiao City, after this great victory, will not encounter external forces again in a short time. The threat from the kingdom of God is just the right amount of peace of mind to solve the problems of these tree people. Xiaopinggan had seen the appearance of those tree people on the battlefield a few days ago. To be honest, if those tree people were not suppressed by the Templar warriors, those tree people would be no less than an opponent of giants on the battlefield. Has a natural advantage in siege or defense. The troops of Gru Kingdom did not make good use of the advantages of tree people. In Xiaopingan's view, those tree people are not suitable for long-distance expeditions. The combat environment of tree people should be in the big forest, with other arms and with the cooperation of the troops. The abilities of the tree people can be brought into full play in the forest. It would be a waste to take the tree people out alone. Under the eyes of heaven, the forest around the lake gradually changed its appearance in Xiaopinggan's eyes. Some of the big green trees that glowed gradually became clear in Xiaopinggan's eyes. Those big green trees were partly scattered all over the forest around the lake, hidden in the forest. Among them, there is one every 10 kilometers, and in the depths of the mountains more than 100 kilometers northeast of the lake, there are towering giant trees, where a large amount of green light gathers. That should be the nest of the tree people here. Xiaopinggan took a look in the air and saw that there were almost more than 400 tree people gathered there. Underground in those tree man gathering areas, the boundary symbol of a dark gray tree man lair was clearly visible. A moment later, Xiaopinggan landed in the center of the tree man's lair and turned into a human form. The place where Xiaopinggan landed was deep in the forest. Around here, there were big trees tens of meters high. The sound of insects and birds filled the surroundings. At first glance, it was really hard to tell who among these big trees was the tree people. Xiaopinggan was too lazy to pay attention to this. He walked to the place where the boundary talisman of the tree man's lair was hidden, stamped his foot, and activated the digging technique. There was a bang on the ground, and a large hole more than 10 meters deep appeared in Xiaopinggan. Peace before your eyes. After digging out the soil above the big hole, there are densely intertwined tree roots underneath. Those tree roots are like barbed wire and prison cages, densely intertwined and protecting the hole below. There is also a dark hole under the tree roots. The boundary talisman leading to the underground and the tree man's lair is hidden deep in the ground. Xiaopinggan's move obviously alerted the tree people who were still quietly observing him. When he flew over just now, the tree people had already noticed him, but they didn't move. The tree people seemed to know that this kind of person could fly over. It's not easy to mess with. They put wooden stakes there one by one. Now, they can't hold them anymore. The next second, the ground under Xiaopinggan's feet undulated like waves, as if the entire forest was breathing. Inside the large hole he dug, there were huge tree roots, like pythons and earthworms. Came out and sealed the hole tightly again. Intruder, this is our home. You are not welcome. Please leave. A voice that sounded like it was coming from a huge oak barrel buzzed in Xiaopinggan's ears, more than 100 meters away from Xiaopinggan. The skinny bark of a big tree outside moved, and two emerald green eyes suddenly opened. With the appearance of these two eyes, the big tree came to life, and the surrounding soil surged. The huge tree trunk, branches, and roots turned into arms and 2 feet. The big tree, as well as the 7 or 8 big trees around it, walked directly towards Xiaopinggan step by step. On the periphery, more and more big trees were shaking, and the entire forest floor seemed to be undulating and breathing. This gave people the feeling that the entire forest was coming to life. Xiaopinggan calmly looked at the big trees that were walking towards him and were more than 10 times taller than him, and just said coldly, I only give you 2 ways, surrender, or destroy. Arrogant intruder, we are the masters of this forest. You are making an enemy of the entire forest. We will not give in. The big tree that just spoke seemed to be angered. A huge strip stretched out from his trunk. The huge root system was waving in the air like a giant whip. The root system hit the ground. With a loud roar, a deep ravine more than 30 meters long was drawn out on the ground with great power. To deal with this kind of tree people, the best spell is of course the fire method, such as summoning the Suzaku. Xiaopinggan is not sure whether the breath of the 6-winged Peking is useful for these tree people. He just wants to give it a try. releasing a trace of the six-winged Penking's aura towards the furious tree men. Then, the next second, the trembling ground in the forest stopped. The furious tree people stopped and were frozen in place, their bodies shaking non-stop. It works. Xiaoping'an felt happy. He once again turned his attention to the big hole under his feet. Just as his heart moved, the densely packed tree roots in the big hole under his feet suddenly gave way, revealing the entrance of the hole. Xiaoping'an jumped directly into the cave at his feet. The cave, hundreds of meters deep underground, is like a huge underground maze. The walls around the cave are no longer soil, but intertwined tree roots. Those tree roots are layered on top of each other, like intertwined paths. The wall is guarding the boundary talisman of the tree people deep underground, and with the arrival of Xiaoping'an, the walls composed of tree roots are like gates, constantly opening, revealing the path inside, allowing people to. Xiaoping'an drove straight in. As he walked, Xiaoping'an suddenly frowned, because he discovered that the wall obstacles arranged by the underground tree roots were not random and chaotic, but were arranged according to the direction of the 5 elements tracing array, dividing the underground walls. The 3 natures of earth, wood, and water have been brought into play to the extreme. The wood energy of the entire forest, that is, the energy of the blue dragon, has been drawn over and used for this formation. If another summoner comes down and wants to enter the underground core here and touch these tree people's boundary talisman is not an easy task. It's strange, can these tree people also know the formation, Xiaoping'an said to himself, but this idea only flashed in Xiaoping'an's head and was rejected by him. These tree people are also a clan of heaven and earth spiritual beings. Maybe they can. He was born with the ability to master certain wood-type formations, but this underground formation, and the azure dragon energy extracted from his eyes, were by no means the means of tree people, but the methods of the formation master. Are there other summoners hidden underground? Xiaoping'an kept walking, but his whole body suddenly cheered up. Finally, when Xiaoping'an came to the core area of the formation, he saw the treant's boundary talisman hidden here, and the summoner. To be precise, it was the remains of a summoner, a pale golden body. The skeleton is the soul body of the summoner who fell in the kingdom of God. The death of this soul body actually also means the fall and death of the summoner. There is no difference between the two. The pale golden skeleton sat cross-legged on a throne that was entangled with petrified tree roots underground. It was unknown how many years it had been dead here, and the clothes on its body had completely decayed. Only the pale golden skeleton showed that he was the cultivation and realm of a demigod during his lifetime. Xiaoping'an carefully approached the skeleton and found that the bones in the head and chest of the skeleton were in a broken state. At the heart position of the skeleton's chest, there was a small black arrow. The small arrow only had the shape of a human palm. It was so long, shot from the back of the skeleton, directly hit the heart, and then stayed in the summoner's body. In the right hand of the skeleton, there is still an incomplete bronze array plate, and on his throne, there is a world bead covered with dust. After practicing for countless years and going through all kinds of hardships to come to this world, he did not expect that the final outcome would be his death, possibly because of someone plotting against him. Looking at this skeleton, Xiaoping'an also sighed secretly in his heart. These tree men are probably the summoned objects of this summoner before. Senior, don't blame me. I didn't mean to disturb you today. It's just that this place is too close to my mandala. There is a group of tree people here, so I have to come and investigate, Xiaoping'an said to the skeleton. As he did so, his Peking aura was already wrapped in divine power, intruding into the tree man's lair boundary talisman, trying to fuse with it. Fusing the boundary talisman of this tree man's lair is as easy as fusing the boundary talisman of the flying scorpion's lair. In just a blink of an eye, the original grey boundary talisman of the tree man's lair turned green, and all the tree people became green. It became Xiaoping'an's summon. After reintegrating the boundary talisman of the tree man's lair, the last breath left by the skeleton in the world of God seemed to be annihilated. Then, under Xiaoping's eyes, the skeleton turned into dust bit by bit and dissipated. In front of Xiaoping, all dust returns to dust, dust returns to dust. In the end, only the small black arrow, the broken formation disc, and a boundary bead were left on the tree root throne where the skeleton had been sitting cross-legged. Xiaoping waved his hand, and the three things came into his hands at once. After using his divine power to wipe away the dust on the boundary beads, a rule and a square light and shadow were revealed in the boundary beads. Among the light and shadow, there were two a small golden seal script, Motzi. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 968. In Lingxiao City, in the sky above the giant tower of the divine prison, the dense nebula of divine power has joined together, like a huge vortex hovering on the top of the giant tower. Xiaoping and the others went on this expedition and completely annihilated the troops of the kingdom of Gru. The 7,000 light infantry, 5,000 wolf cavalry, 2,000 engineers, 2,000 werewolves, 5 giants, 2 accompanying mages, and 4,000 farmers were almost all transformed at this moment. Became the divine power on the giant tower. Not to mention anything else, the divine power points brought by 5,000 wolf cavalry are already 400,000 points. Others such as light infantry, engineers, farmers, giants, werewolves, and military mages also contributed more than 500,000 divine power points. Therefore, at this moment, the divine power points that the giant tower divine prison can provide have exceeded 1 million points for the first time. For Xiaoping, his divine power has never been so generous and luxurious, and Lingxiao City has never been so rich as it is now. As Han Xian and Xuanhuan returned with the expeditionary force, although it was already dark, the entire Lingxiao City suddenly became lively. There were crackling firecrackers everywhere in Lingxiao City, which were spontaneously carried out by the people in the city. During the celebration, the city was extremely lively with fireworks everywhere. During this period, because the resources of the Sulphur Mountains acquired by Xiaoping were too abundant, the craftsmen in Lingxiao City had already made gunpowder. With gunpowder, the firecrackers naturally appeared. Xiaoping, who had returned to Lingxiao City, stood on a high tower in the temple with his hands behind his back. Looking at the lively scene in the city at night, he felt something special in his heart. It had been many years since he had seen such a scene. This scene, again. It reminded him of his life a long time ago. It was a scene that could only be seen during the Chinese New Year. But later, the Chinese actually castrated their own culture and traditions for the reason of polluting the environment. This reason is really absurd and bizarre. Lord, those tree people have been subdued by you. This voice came from Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan's tone was filled with surprise and a hint of regret. After seeing the power of the Templar Knights on the battlefield, Xuanhuan was already thinking about taking the Templar Knights with him on the way back. They went to annihilate those tree people and make great contributions to Lingxiao City. Unexpectedly, those tree people had already become on the same front as him. Han Xian and Kui Hao also stood behind Xiaoping. After they heard Xiaoping said that they had conquered the tree people, they just looked at each other, and silently exchanged a lot of information in their eyes. The Lord brought him this time. The soldiers went out to complete the set goal and annihilated the first batch of troops from the kingdom of Gru. Lingxiao City was now as stable as Mount Tai. But just after returning to Lingxiao City, the Lord went to deal with the tree people non-stop. What does this mean? This probably means that the Lord is preparing to leave the kingdom of God in the future and go outside to find an opportunity to become a god. The Lord can't wait any longer. Since those tree people have been subdued by the Lord, it is really gratifying. Our Lingxiao City has added a new force. Those tree people can just protect the east for Lingxiao City, Kui Hao said calmly, and then looked at Xuanhuan. General Xue, if you have time in the next few days, why not go to the cultivation hall to study it, maybe you will gain something. Xuanhuan scratched his head and nodded seriously. I went to the cultivation palace last time, but I am not very qualified. I only feel that the cultivation picture and Taijinhua purpose in the palace are extremely mysterious. It doesn't matter if there is anything gained for the time being, it's over this time, and it's estimated that nothing will happen for a while in the future, so I'll go check it out again. The Lord has just come back. Are you ready to leave Lingxiao City? Han Xian asked directly. Hearing Han Xian's question, Xiaoping'an looked away from the bustling Lingxiao City and nodded to the three of them. That's what I meant. Lingxiao City will not encounter any major changes in a short time. I can just use this time to look for opportunities outside to improve myself and Lingxiao City's strength. Judging from this contest with the Gru Kingdom, although we won this time, the challenges in the future will be more severe. After I leave, I also hope that you will work together to protect Lingxiao City. If Lingxiao City encounters any problems again, I can come back at any time. Since the Lord is leaving, let's lay some foundation for Lingxiao City before leaving. If my guess is correct, the divine power available to the Lord at this moment should have exceeded 1 million points. If these divine powers can be spent in Lingxiao City, I am confident in the future, we can earn more divine power for our Lord and make Lingxiao City impregnable, Han Xian said bluntly. What specific requirements do you have? Xiaoping'an asked. Your Majesty, please summon another 100 spies for Lingxiao City. Lingxiao City has just won a great victory. The first thing that needs to be expanded is the Black Ice Platform. Without the accurate information provided by the Black Ice Platform, we would not have won so easily this time. Both armies in a battle, the temple counts first, Han Xian said directly. Okay, Xiaoping'an nodded. He was now rich and powerful. He once again summoned 100 spies. The required divine power was only 12,000 points. Xiaoping'an glanced at the three of them and said, other than that, what else do you want? The number of farmers in Lingxiao City at the moment is just over 7,000. Compared with the size of Lingxiao City, the number of farmers is still tight. Lingxiao City is still unable to fully allow the urban population to reproduce naturally and continue to thrive, so we want Lingxiao City to gain a firm foothold in the future. The number of farmers in Lingxiao City must increase by at least 30,000 on the current basis. Only after the population of Lingxiao City can reproduce naturally, among the new population, can we continuously cultivate the next generation of Lingxiao City. Warriors, craftsmen and other talents can enrich the strength of Lingxiao City at the minimum cost and turn time into our friend. This is also the inevitable path for the growth of all the kingdoms of gods in the kingdom of God's world, Kui Hao said. Kui Hao is right. Now it takes 10 points of divine power to summon a farmer, but as long as there is land, the children born by farmers do not need to consume Xiaoping'an's divine power. When those children grow up, after learning and training, they can dig. He used his talents to become a cavalryman, a way soldier, an archer, a craftsman, an assassin, a spy, and even a scholar and counselor for Xiaoping'an. Okay, then let's summon another 30,000 farmers, women, and craftsmen of all kinds for Lingxiao City, Xiaoping'an nodded. Increasing these people would consume more than 300,000 points of divine power. The advantage is that the people of Lingxiao City will be able to have babies in the future, as long as they don't encounter in the event of major changes, the population of Lingxiao City will increase. The population of Lingxiao City is not large now, so we should adopt the route of elite soldiers. Before the Lord leaves, please ask the Lord to summon another 2,000 Templar warriors as the main force of Lingxiao City, Han Xian bowed and said. 2,000 Templars may seem like a small number, but they consume 720,000 points of divine power. In just a few words, Kui Hao and Han Xian had already consumed almost all the new million points of divine power on the giant tower. Xiaoping'an smiled bitterly, looked at Kui Hao and Han Xian and said, is this what you two have agreed upon? It's just a tacit understanding, Kui Hao said calmly. This is the most beneficial thing for Lingxiao City, Han Xian also said. Okay, I agree, Xiaopinggan waved his hand magnanimously. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand towards Kui Hao, and a little golden light with a few mysterious small seals penetrated from his fingers into Kui Hao's head. Made Kui Hao's body tremble, and then a rune like an official seal appeared in the middle of Kui Hao's eyebrows. The golden light just now is the seal of the city lord of Lingxiao City. Master this seal, and I will give you the power to mobilize the giant tower and summon the rights of farmers and craftsmen in the temple. Kui Hao's body was shaken and he quickly bowed to Xiaopinggan. Kui Hao will definitely live up to the Lord's trust. Then, Xiaopinggan pointed at Han Xian again, and the same golden light penetrated Han Xian's forehead. A tiger talisman-like rune appeared between Han Xian's eyebrows. This is the tiger talisman military seal of Lingxiao City. If you master this seal, you can mobilize the divine power of the giant tower to summon the generals in the temple, and you can also lead the army in battle. Han Xian also followed Kui Hao and bowed to Xiaopinggan. Han Xian will definitely live up to the Lord's trust. Xiaopinggan's third finger touched the center of Xuerangui's eyebrows. A sword seal suddenly appeared in the middle of Xuerangui's eyebrows. This is the sword seal of the general of Lingxiao City. This seal can give you the responsibility of commanding the troops, to control the troops, and secondly, it can make your consciousness immortal. Even if you are killed, I can resurrect you again. Xuerangui also prostrated himself and was extremely moved. Xuerangui will definitely live up to the Lord's trust. Xiaopinggan waved his hand again, and the temple was filled with light. A dense crowd of farmers and craftsmen were summoned from the temple and poured out in an orderly manner. Then came the spies, and then the Templar warriors. The divine power on the giant tower was almost bottomed out in the blink of an eye. Lingxiao City will be left to you. With these words still echoing in the ears of Han Xian, Kui Hao and Xuerangui, Xiaopinggan's figure disappeared. Han Xian stood up and looked at the 2,000 Templars who were already standing in the square. His face was as dark as water, and he looked at Kui Hao and Xuerangui. Since the Lord has given us the family's wealth, our responsibility is to let the Lord's the family is getting richer and richer, so we must not let the Lord down. I wonder what the general has planned, Kui Hao asked directly. Han Xian smiled slightly, with a gleam in his eyes, and then looked at the northern sky of Lingxiao City with unfathomable eyes. Don't you think it is a waste to leave the Templar Knights and those flying scorpions in Lingxiao City? Our neighbors in the north, it's too leisurely, and you actually still have the mind to make plans for Lingxiao City. Xuerangui suddenly became energetic and his chest puffed up. Xuerangui can go out again at any time. Let's rest for 7 days, and then we'll talk again after 7 days, Han Xian said, already walking down the tower. Xuerangui was stunned and quickly caught up. Ah, General, where are you going? Of course it's the cultivation hall, Han Xian said without looking back. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 969. Just 3 or 4 hours after Xiaopinggan left Lingxiao City, in the center of Lingxiao City, in an open space outside the temple, light suddenly appeared, the power of the 5 elements surged from all directions, and the outline of a majestic building began to appear. At the same time, a full 1,100 points of divine power surged out of the vortex of divine power in the caisson of the temple. Xiaopinggan's upper limit of divine power in the temple suddenly reached 27,218 points. When the light dissipated, there was another magnificent temple building in Lingxiao City. The main entrance of the temple was like an upright compass. A statue holding a sword, with several large characters on the statue, Maha's Temple of Organs. When entering the temple, the first thing you see is a black stone tablet in front of the temple. On the stone tablet are the contents of the Emojing, and on the walls of the temple, there are various materials related to mechanics, optics, mechanics, various objects, and sculptures of architecture, geometry. With the appearance of this temple, all the craftsmen in Lingxiao city became excited. All the craftsmen rushed towards the Mahist temple, entered the temple, and greedily looked at the various contents in the emojing, worship. A convex mirror forms an image, so that's how it is. Whether the mirror surface is flat, concave, or convex has its own mystery. This is where the concentration and dispersion of light changes. A craftsman looked at this sentence in the emojing and became excited all of a sudden. He stood up and danced with joy. I understand, I finally understand. Just when the craftsman was happy, a ray of light appeared on his body, and his whole aura suddenly became more wise and capable. He actually completed an advancement without realizing it. Just after this craftsman completed an advancement, another craftsman shouted excitedly, a brilliance appeared on his body, and he also advanced. The advancement of warriors lies on the battlefield, while the advancement of craftsmen lies in their understanding of the ways of nature and the mysteries of heaven and earth. In the cave on the uninhabited island, the light cocoon on Xiaopinggan, who was sitting cross-legged, was shattered, and the Mozi world pearl was finally integrated. With the divine power washing his body, Xiaopinggan finally opened his eyes, and his whole body, his physical strength and spirit have once again reached the peak of when he came to the land of the divine seal. The world beads of these various schools of thought are indeed generous. The divine power provided by Mozi's world beads has actually reached 1,100 points. A smile appeared on Xiaopinggan's face. The reward given by this world bead was completely beyond him. As expected, he actually gave so much at once. You must know that this is in the land of divine seals, where he becomes the summoner of demigods. Every month, the recovery of the secret mandala's divine power is 100%, not half. Which means that just by fusing this world bead, he will be able to gain 1100 more points of divine power every month in the future. Force is the reason why shapes are excited. Force is the reason why objects change their state of motion. Xiaopinggan couldn't help but read the sentence in the emojing, shook his head, with a look of regret on his face. Ai Sursak translated Mozi's sentence. Any object must maintain uniform linear motion or rest until an external force forces it to change its state of motion. This became Newton's first law. Newton's first law should be Mozi's. This is the first law of Zi. Mozi discovered this law 2,000 years earlier than Newton. The later generations of China have little understanding of the wisdom and brilliance of their ancestors. When they praised Newton, they may not have thought about this issue. Sir Isaac said that standing on the shoulders of giants, that giant may be the ancients of China. After sighing in his heart, Xiaopinggan stopped thinking and took out the small black arrow with a move of his hand. It had just been fused with the world bead left by the fallen demigod summoner, and Xiaopinggan had not yet carefully explored the purpose of this small black arrow that killed the demigod summoner. The small black arrow was extremely hard, but it felt like a feather in his hand. It was so light that it had almost no weight. With Xiaopinggan's extensive knowledge, he couldn't tell for a moment what the small arrow was. What kind of material can actually give people such contradictory feelings? The length of this small arrow from the arrow cluster to the tail was about 20 centimeters. The arrow was pitch black and extremely smooth, without any runes or marks. It was unknown how it penetrated the heart of the demigod summoner. But this thing can kill a demigod summoner, so this thing is definitely not ordinary. Xiaopinggan tried to inject his own divine power into the arrow body, but the little arrow had no response. Xiaopinggan tried to inject his soul power again, and tried to invade the little arrow with the breath of the six-winged Peking, but the little arrow still didn't respond. In the end, Xiaopinggan simply tried to put a drop of his own blood on the small arrow. His blood rolled back and forth on the arrow like beads, unable to integrate into the arrow body at all, and the small arrow still didn't react at all. Finally, Xiaoping'an gritted his teeth and put the small arrow in the air in front of him. He used the method of refining the formation disk and tempered it with divine fire to melt the small arrow. In the end, it took almost an hour, and the little arrow floated quietly in the divine fire, without even changing its color. Xiaoping'an removed the divine fire and let the small arrow fall into his hand. He found that the temperature of the small arrow was exactly the same as before. He refined the divine fire into gold and iron in the formation plate in the blink of an eye, but it only took an hour. The temperature of this little arrow did not even rise 1 degree. Hiss! Xiaoping'an took a slight breath. He put the small black arrow in his hand and turned it over and over. He held the arrow with one hand and made 2 stabbing movements. I couldn't help scratching my head, feeling something was wrong. Is this thing a legendary artifact? But it shouldn't be used like this. Not knowing how to use this small arrow, Xiaoping'an simply gave up struggling and groping, received the small arrow into his mandala warehouse again, and then took out the somewhat incomplete one left by the fallen demigod summoner. Bronze array plate. It turns out to be the formation disk of the Vientiane formation. This formation disk is considered to be a good high-end product. The materials used for the formation disk and the base array are very particular, and the refining techniques are also sophisticated. However, the core of this formation disk has been if a person destroys it, there is little point in repairing it. We can only re-refine it and use its materials to refine other formation disks. The fallen demigod summoner may also be an formation master. Xiaoping'an is very picky about the formation disks. Yes, in the eyes of others, this formation disk may still have the necessity and value to be repaired, but in Xiaoping'an's eyes, this formation disk can only be used as waste. With the repair time, he refining a new Vientiane formation, that's enough. Xiaoping carefully looked at the gap where the formation disk was destroyed. Suddenly, his heart moved. He took out the small black arrow that he had just put away, pointed at the formation disk, and activated it. The incomplete part of the array suddenly grew larger in Xiaoping'an's eyes, covering hundreds of square meters and occupying most of the cave. Then, Xiaoping'an saw a small hole in the corner of the death gate where the incomplete formation disk was located. He used his spiritual consciousness to hold a small black arrow and tried to pass through the small hole in the incomplete formation disk, and found that the arrow can just fit through the small hole. This result made Xiaoping'an take a breath of cold air again and his face changed slightly. The Vientiane formation is good at defense. Looking at the situation in front of us, this small black arrow first destroyed and penetrated the Vientiane formation, and then penetrated the heart of the fallen demigod summoner. Is this little black arrow really a magical weapon? Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 970. Regardless of whether the little black arrow is a divine weapon or not, Xiaoping'an has to leave this island. Almost all the resources available on the island have been obtained. Although the island is very hidden, if you want to become a god and ignite the divine fire of the avenue, you can only leave this island and go to the world of divine seals to find your own opportunities. After resting in the cave for a night, Xiaoping'an put away the formation disk in the cave early the next morning, and after using a fire spell to melt the entire cave, he left this familiar cave. There was heavy goose feather snow flying outside, and the cold wind howled. After turning into a plume of blue smoke and flying out of the cave, he came to the sea, blasted a large hole more than 1 meter wide in the ice on the sea surface, and then plunged under the ice, preparing to leave from the bottom of the water. If the flying technique cannot be used, then for Xiaoping'an, it is actually better to leave from the bottom of the water. Although he can also transform into a crane and use illusions in the sky, his flying speed is not very fast. These two skills are not great for high-level summoners, especially those at the demigod level. His spells can easily be discovered from a very long distance and become the target and prey of others. The situation in the land of the divine seal is unknown and it is surrounded by dangers. This is not a good choice. If you go underwater, the probability of being discovered by other summoners is very low. Xiaopinggan is actually more powerful in the water than on land, because Zhenhe Zhenjun once let him fuse a dragon blood soul crystal, which gave him unparalleled abilities in the water, and he still retains this ability. If there are too many dangerous creatures in the water and he cannot stay there, with his magic and ability to move in the water, he can come out of the water at any time and return to the sky or the ground. Xiaopinggan still has this confidence. Although there are some unknown dangers in the water, such as those monsters are relatively easy to deal with. Moreover, Xiaopinggan discovered one thing on the island these days, and that is his innate spiritual creature, the six-winged Peking. It is possible to completely restrain all kinds of strange aquatic tribes in the sea of the divine seal world. Since the aura of the six-winged Peking can restrain flying scorpions, tree men, and even warship birds and other creatures in the divine world, it is more likely to restrain those fierce creatures in the water. This is the absolute suppression of blood and race. This is Xiaopinggan's inference, and he can just use this opportunity to try it, because in the legend, the Daepan feeds on dragons, and the dragon tribe is the top existence in the water. Since the dragon tribe can be restrained by the Daepan, then what's more, other races in the water are not a problem for Daepan. The sea water was extremely cold, but as soon as Xiaopinggan entered the water, he was like a tiger returning to the mountain and a dragon entering the sea. He suddenly regained his composure, and the entire scene of the bottom of the sea suddenly came into his eyes. The sea surface is sealed by a thick layer of ice, and there is only a faint layer of light under the ice surface. The entire sea surface is extremely calm, and there is no wind or wave. Tens of meters below the seabed, it is pitch black, but this is only true for ordinary people. For a strong demigod, what Xiaopinggan saw in the sea was crystal clear water, as well as all kinds of strange volcanic rocks and marine life formed on the seabed. Under the sea near the island are various rocks and reefs formed by the island's volcanic eruptions that flowed into the sea over countless years. Large areas of seaweed, kelp and some small fish grow among these seafloor rocks and reefs. Free. Xiaopinggan was like a torpedo in the water, as fast as lightning. After seeing the surrounding situation clearly, he went deep into the water 1,000 meters deep and rushed directly towards the southwest of the sea area. After leaving the sea area near the island, the sea here is simply bottomless and extremely deep. The depth of any place in the sea is tens of thousands of meters. On the seabed of tens of thousands of meters, there are still some depths that are not visible. The dark trench at the bottom. Xiaopinggan had previously asked Kui Hao to divine for him to see which direction would be better for him. The result of Kui Hao's divination was that the southwest was good luck, so Xiaopinggan swam toward the southwest without using any magic along the way. He couldn't hide his body and whereabouts, and just rushed straight into the water with such arrogance. For those monsters in the sea, this is simply delicious food delivered to their mouths. After a while, 7 or 8 strange fish more than 10 meters long rushed behind Xiaopinggan. Those strange fish opened their huge mouths one by one, trying to eat Xiaopinggan as lunch. In Xiaopinggan's eyes, these strange fish were like ants. Xiaopinggan was not moved at all, and the speed of these strange fish in the water was not as fast as his. He didn't bother to pay attention to it and swam in the established direction. Just half an hour after Xiaopinggan entered the sea, a huge shadow emerged from the bottom of the sea and surged towards Xiaopinggan. That figure was a huge strange fish more than 100 meters long. The fish has a body similar to that of a sea snake or a hairtail fish, a strange triangular head, 2 eyes that glow faintly red in the dark water, teeth as sharp as swords, its whole body is blue and black, and there are a row of 5 or 6 on its back. Meter tall, with black fins as sharp and ferocious as swords. I don't know if this thing is a fish or a snake. It's so fast. It can jump hundreds of meters in the water by swinging its body, just like flying in the water. It's hardly slower than Xiaopinggan. As this water monster appeared in the sea, Some of the other strange fish chasing Xiaopinggan in the surrounding sea were suddenly like rabbits feeling the tiger's breath. They were startled and fled in panic one by one, no longer daring to follow Xiaopinggan. Finally, someone decent has arrived. This guy shouldn't be someone to be trifled with in the sea. Xiaopinggan looked at the arrival of the sea monster. He was not surprised but overjoyed. Not only did he not escape, but he also charged directly towards the sea monster. Go! The sea monster was also confused for a moment. Could this food still be rushing into his mouth? Just as the sea monster opened its huge mouth in the water, preparing to swallow Xiaopinggan, Xiaopinggan's emperor sword was ready to strike, but before slashing out the emperor's sword, Xiaopinggan faced the monster. The fish released a trace of his six-winged Penking's aura. Then, in less than a second, the sea monster that had stirred up the surrounding sea area with great power stiffened suddenly, trembled, closed its eyes, gritted its teeth, and its body, which was originally as flexible as electricity in the water, suddenly the fish actually stopped moving like a dead fish, with its belly facing up, slowly floating up in the water like a dead snake. Xiaopinggan was stunned. What happened to this strange fish? The reaction was probably too great. He quickly swam to the strange fish's head, which was several times larger than his body, and explored it, only to find that the strange fish seemed to be stunned by fright. The aura of the six-winged Peking is too strong to suppress these sea tribes. Looking at the strange fish that turned its belly, Xiaopinggan scratched his head, thought for a moment, and then moved his hand in the water, with golden light flashing on his fingertips, and wrote a divine inscription with the word Roy, which was printed on the strange fish. On the head of the fish. This divine text with the word royal was obtained by Xiaopinggan when he fused a divine power world bead before. It has the ability to communicate with all kinds of beasts. The next second, the strange fish finally opened its eyes, but its body shrank suddenly and actually curled up into a ball in the water. Its huge body was trembling, its bones were numb, and it looked at Xiaopinggan with fear. Please don't eat me. The consciousness of the strange fish came from Xiaopinggan's head. I won't eat you, you will be my mount now, listen to my orders, and just nod your head when you understand what I mean. Xiaopinggan transferred his consciousness back. The strange fish really nodded in the water. In its consciousness, it seemed that it didn't know what lying was. After feeling the message from Xiaopinggan not to eat it, the strange fish's body finally stopped shaking. It shrank back again, but gradually stretched out, and swam around Xiaopinggan twice as if to please, and finally put its head at Xiaopinggan's feet, so that Xiaopinggan could ride on his head. The aura of the six-winged Peking can indeed restrain the Aqua tribe. Xiaopinggan felt reassured that he no longer had to worry about being in the sea. It's just that there is no sea around Lingxiao City. Even if these water tribes have nests, they have no place to place them. Otherwise, Xiaopinggan really wants this big guy under him to take him back to its nest to see if this thing can draw water. The battle is absolutely fierce. Xiaopinggan rolled his eyes and directly gave the order to the strange fish. Is there anything strange in the nearby sea? Take me to see it. When the strange fish heard Xiaopinggan's words, it took Xiaopinggan and swam quickly in one direction as soon as its body moved. 2 hours later, the strange fish quickly swam hundreds of kilometers in the water, bringing Xiaopinggan to a dark trench. Under the trench, there was a giant ship thousands of meters long covered under the sand. The strange fish, as soon as the fish came, its body stirred slightly in the water, and the sediment on the giant ship was blown away by the water waves, revealing the appearance of the giant ship under the sediment. The giant ship is already dilapidated. I don't know how many years it has sunk here, but it is probably quite a few years ago. In the eyes of the strange fish, this giant ship is a strange place.